Hmm. The Big Bang. Hmm. Did that happen? Oh yeah, it did. I made a video about it. Link in the description. It's stated in Genesis 1 verse 1, when God created the heavens and the earth. Wonder what else is true about Creation Week. Are the creation days really 24-hour periods? Did God actually create all the land animals on day 6? And did he create the universe on day 4, even though it's stated that he created the heavens prior to the first day? Those are some great questions, my friends. And the answers are no. The days are long periods of time, not 24-hour periods. No, God did not create all land animals on day 6, and he created the modern mammals, that is, mammals after the dinosaurs died, and humans on day 6. And no, God did not create the universe on day 4. He created the universe prior to the first day of creation, and he made it visible from the earth on day 4. This and more in today's video. If you're new here, hi, I'm Jack Robertson from Success Unlocked, where I help you discover your dreams and passions and create a roadmap there with personal development. If that sounds interesting, then do consider subscribing. These videos are different from the usual ones I make. However, one of the things I preach here at Success Unlocked is to tell the truth. And that is what I am doing. I'm telling you guys the truth with this series. This is episode 3 of my series, Why I'm a Christian, where I give you guys the scientific evidence to believe the truth of Christianity and to realize that to get to heaven, you must put your evidence based, scientifically backed faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. Today's topic, Creation Week, and the truth behind it. Let's get into it. Welcome to Success Unlocked, where I help you find your success. Day 1. The conditions of the early earth is confirmed by the Bible. With first Genesis 1 verse 2, the earth was formless and empty, and darkness was over the face of the deep waters. Secondly, Job 38 verse 9, when I made clouds its garment, and thick darkness its swaddling band. And thirdly, Psalm 104 verse 6, you covered it with the deep as with a garment, and the waters stood above the mountains. How did Moses know all of this? He must have been told by God. But one thing God didn't tell him was how the earth lost this massive body of water and its incredibly thick atmosphere, about twice as thick as Venus's. Right now it's 92 times less thick as Venus's, so all it says is, then God said, let there be light. And there was light. Genesis 1 verse 3. Which is nothing except magical and vague. God, how did you change Earth? So what happened then? How did our moon come to be? Well, the theory goes that there was a planet called Theta, which was at least the size of Mars, probably twice as large, which collided with Earth some 4.5 billion years ago. The collision was at a velocity as low as about 4 kilometers per second. For reference, asteroids typically clock up speeds of about 50 kilometers per second, and it was at an angle of about 45 degrees. This event would have thrown almost all of Earth's original atmosphere into space, with a cloud of debris eventually coalescing into the moon. It's not a lot to go off of, considering all we have is God commanding light to exist, but it's the only scientific theory that works, and it's an incredibly well designed process. If either the velocity, angle, timing, placement, or the materials which Theta and early Earth were made of were off by just a few percent, the Earth would be void of life today. Clearly, Day 1 gets pretty much everything right, and the change in Earth's atmosphere due to the formation of the moon, makes way for the Earth's water cycle to begin formation. Day 2. The water cycle is something which has a larger impact and requires more design than at first thought. In order to get land masses, the Earth would need a sufficient water cycle in which snow, ice, and liquid water can freely cycle from one state to another. If it is to meet the needs of an abundance of animal, plant, and fungal species, the rainfall must vary from one region to another. It has to vary between 2 and 200 inches of rainfall per year for a few billion years. The balancing act of various factors must be just right if a water cycle such as this is to exist. The physical characteristics of the sun and the earth, the atmospheric composition, the temperature, the pressure, the wind velocities, and the changing values of all of these atmospheric characteristics at various distances from the earth's surface. To get the water cycle is obviously an intricately well designed and well fine-tuned process, requiring the appropriate time, effort, and patience on God's behalf. Thankfully, he waited 9 billion years just to create the Earth, so I don't think he's going to run out of patience anytime soon. The other thing that the water cycle needs to get right is actually the sun. You see, the sun lost about 20% of its mass within the first half billion or 500 million years of its life, which equates to over 100% of its current luminosity. Since then, its luminosity has slowly increased due to its nuclear furnace converting more hydrogen into helium. If the sun does not make this conversion at the right rate, it will increase in luminosity either too fast or too slow, resulting in insufficient or overexposure to light. Amazingly, Day 2 also gets everything right, showing how the Earth was perfectly designed for large-scale life diversity like plants to take hold due to its amazing atmosphere. Day 3. In order for life to exist, however, it needs a place to live. Plant life has existed in the sea and on the land for hundreds of millions of years. Some say 200 million before the first sea animals, that's like 700 million years ago. Some say as far as 1.2 billion years ago. But it first appeared as single-celled algae in the sea and other unicellular plants. In order for plants to pump oxygen into the atmosphere, it must have a place to live on. This is created through plate tectonics. The activity of these plate tectonics started the conversion of floor basalts into silicates, which are just hydrated basalts. Because the silicates are lighter than the basalts, then they float above them and they build up. Over time, the land masses would form. So it is directly the result of plate tectonics that the land rises above sea level. This happens in spurts of growth, interestingly, not a linear fashion. About 2 billion years ago, about half the Earth's current age, is when the first major spike in land masses occurred, and this is largely what Day 3 is referring to here. From 0 to about 20% of its surface was land, and this happened right around here, just about halfway through the creation story. Long before we knew anything about basalts or silicates or tectonic activity, the Bible was predicting the appearance of the landmass at the right time. As you can see, Day 3 is also scientifically accurate, with the plate tectonics driving the formation of the first landmasses and plants arriving on the scene about 1 billion years after, using sunlight to convert it into carbon dioxide, water, and ATP, along with starch and oxygen. The oxygen is exhaled into the atmosphere, compounding over time to change the Earth's atmosphere for a second time, this time from translucent, light permitting, to transparent, light transmitting. Day 4. This is the changing of Earth's atmosphere. As mentioned previously, it was already translucent from Day 1 due to the formation of Earth's moon. This time around, plate tectonics will drive the surface carbonates deep underground, where the pressure and heat will break them down, and they shall be released into the atmosphere by volcanoes to react with the oxygen exhaled by plants. The oxygen is a replacement for carbon dioxide, which is what they inhale. This is helpful as carbon dioxide easily reacts with atmospheric water to form carbonic acid. This acid falls to the surface where it reacts with rocks to form carbonates. These carbonates would have taken enough carbon dioxide and water from the atmosphere to turn this planet into a permanently frozen arid wasteland, just like Mars. That is, if it were not for some fine-tuned factors like the plate tectonics breaking down such carbonates. When the plates collide together, they drove the surface carbonates deep into the crust. They would be exposed to extreme pressure and heat, turning them into carbon dioxide, water, and other minerals. These materials would be recycled back up to the surface by volcanoes, increasing the oxygen levels in the atmosphere and providing more carbon dioxide for the plants to inhale, which is just then converted more into oxygen. The Genesis creation story, as you can see, is surprisingly accurate, with the initial conditions, creation of unicellular life, the changing of Earth's atmosphere twice, the formation of the water cycle and land, and the creation of plant life. I didn't mention the creation of unicellular life, but the Spirit of God hovering over the surface of the waters, Genesis 1 verse 2, does actually refer to God creating life, because hovering is used elsewhere in the Bible to refer to an eagle breeding, to refer to an eagle hovering over her young. So all this atmospheric change, and for what? If God truly is responsible for all of this, then why is he doing it? The answer is animals. Day 5. The animals that God creates on day 5 require the visibility of the heavens to know when to eat and hunt, when to migrate, and when to sleep, and when to awaken. The internal clocks, or circadian rhythms, of the animals regulate everything synchronized to a 24-hour schedule. The sea animals described refers to the Cambrian explosion, not a literal explosion, but a metaphorical one, describing the sheer variety of animal life which was spontaneously created in the sea around 500 million years ago. The Hebrew words mentioned in Genesis 1 verse 20, day 5, are sheres, nephesh, and op. Sheres refers to the swarms of small or minute creatures. This same word appears frequently in the first 5 books of the Old Testament, with reference to smaller body-sized species that are neither birds nor mammals. Scientifically speaking, when used for land life, it usually includes amphibians, reptiles, and insects. The Cambrian explosion event could not have happened earlier for a few reasons. First, the oxygen level had to be sufficient enough. Only through billions of years of photosynthesis and plate tectonics could a sufficient percentage be acquired. Second, the tectonic activity and erosion. If these are not fine-tuned, then the appropriate habitats won't be formed. And 3. The sun's luminosity must be just right. So it must increase in luminosity at the right rate, not to be too hot or cold by the time the Cambrian explosion happens. I find it particularly interesting, however, that along with all these sea animals, the Hebrew mentions reptiles. I find this because the text mentions birds, and because the text mentions birds of the air. And, as I'm sure we all know, whether you're an evolutionist or not, birds are part of the dinosaur family tree. But day 6 makes reference to livestock, beasts, and creatures which crawl along the ground. This is where scholars usually make a misinterpretation. The biblical Hebrew doesn't actually support that interpretation of general land life, but rather specifically our livestock, predatory animals, and small animals. Predator mammals and small mammals. Taking this into account, we can reconcile our misinterpretation. The Hebrew word sheres refers to all life prior to the age of mammals. Dinosaurs were by conclusion created and ruled Earth on day 5. This includes the birds which are specifically mentioned, along with flying insects and pterosaurs, which most people call flying dinosaurs, but really they're not. This matches the fossil record. With the Cambrian explosion came the first life, animals in the sea, first animal life. Shortly after, the insects and the amphibians arrived, not long after, and the reptiles appeared, and one specific group called the dinosaurs ruled the remaining 150 million years of creation day 5. Thankfully, but disappointingly, their reign was ended when a 3-kilometer long asteroid smashed into the Earth in the Gulf of Mexico. This extraordinarily well designed event ended day 5 and wiped out mammalian competition. This, through time, would pave the way for the age of mammals and the age of humans to come. Day 6. This day God created the mammals and man. Some believe it is the creation of all land animals, but we should never trust something without looking into it. Genesis 1 verse 24 states, "And God said, Let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things and beasts of the earth according to their kinds." This mentioning of livestock, creeping things and beasts is very specific, and although it could refer to all things which creep, all herbivores and all carnivores, the Hebrew suggests a more specific approach. As Dr. Hugh Ross, an astrophysicist and the founder of Reasons to Believe, explains on page 78 of his book Navigating Genesis, the 3 Hebrew nouns for these creatures have multiple meanings, some general and some specific, but the context is best served by the narrower usage. The Hebrew words behema and heya in this context seem best understood as a reference to 2 groups of long-legged quadrupeds, those that can be easily tamed or domesticated for agricultural purposes, like a cow, and those that are difficult to tame but have potential to become excellent pets and helpers for humans, like the dog. The Hebrew word remes is most likely referring to short-legged land mammals such as rodents and hares. This makes sense given that the fossil record agrees. We must remember that the fossil record is God's record and proof of what order He created the animals in, so to ignore it is like to ignore a verse here in the Bible. This puts creation day 6's beginning at about 63 to 64 million years ago, when life was just starting to recover from the asteroid impact at the end of day 5, which matches the chronology. Later in day 6, God creates humans in His image, along with their cousins, various hominids, shortly prior. According to the scientists who discovered Adam and Eve in our DNA, along with the estimated time ago it has been for Eden to be lush with vegetation, it's been 50,000 years since our arrival on Earth. Since then we have wiped out 4,000 animals on Earth, which is half of what was originally there. As you can see, Creation Day 6 is interpreted very wrongly a lot of the time, but it's just as accurate as the other days. Prior to Adam and Eve's arrival, God was creating animals at a consistent rate of about 1 species per year. After He created humans, He stopped, and not a single new species has been created since then. This past 50,000 years has been Day 7, God's day of creative rest. Day 7. This is sometimes interpreted as a 24-hour period. But if that's what the case is, then what's God creating? And that is partly why it's interpreted like that. Day 7 readers often interpret God's rest as rest from absolutely everything, and thus believe that God's intervention in human affairs daily is evidence of His lack of rest. They aren't wrong there, but Day 7 is going on right now because it does not refer to God resting from everything, just creation. Genesis 2 verse 2 states, "On the 7th day God had finished His work of creation, so He rested from all His work." The mention here of Him finishing His work of creation and resting because of that indicates Him resting from creation only. It does say after that He rested from all His work, but you must remember that God doesn't need to work anymore. Taking care of us is not a chore or work for him. Mainly the work was preparing the world and the cosmos for our arrival. Once he had us made, the work to get there was complete. This resting provides a great explanation for why there are no more species on Earth, and it serves as a point for the length of the creation days. As I said, I personally interpret the Genesis days as long periods of time and not 24-hour periods. Each of the creation days in Genesis 1 ends with "and there was evening and there was morning," which indicates the beginning and end of each day. Day 7 is different, however, as it is left open-ended and without conclusion. Day 7 is different, however, and is left open-ended and without conclusion. As we established, Day 7 is referring to the end of God's creative work, and thus is a day extending longer than 24 hours. If one is to interpret the Bible truthfully, he or she must take the Bible literally in its original language, and because God cannot lie or contradict himself, they must also take it consistently. With this in mind, one cannot take Genesis consistently if the creation week days are only 24 hours long and the seventh day is 50,000 years. Even so, if they are to use the evening and morning as the premise for the day's length, then clearly it's just the daylight hours, not a full 24 hours, in which case I ask, what was God doing at night? And don't say resting, because that's what he's doing now on day 7. One reason why this may create controversy is that the Genesis text says day in English, but are not aware that in Hebrew, Yom has literal different definitions. The 4 are a 24-hour period, some of the daylight hours, all of the daylight hours, and a long period of time. Yom is the only word which can be literally defined as a long period of time. This interpretation takes both creation days 1 to 6 and 7 consistently. The days being too long also matches the science, which I have used as evidence, and it allows one to provide evidence to an unbeliever that the Bible really is the Word of God. Wow. I am mind blown. It is amazing that the biblical authors, i.e. Moses, got so much right so long ago. When contemplating this, I was remembered of a few things. Not only how much I should worship God and how awe-inspiring his works are, but that I shouldn't even be here to experience it in the first place. And that makes me really, really grateful. As always, if you guys have any points or questions you'd like to ask, do be sure to ask them, because I love having talks with you guys, discussing things, and in doing so, remember to be grateful. Remember to worship God instead of anything less fulfilling, and remember to marvel at the works of our Creator. And I'll see you in part 4 of this series, where I shall do the opposite of part 1 and detail the end of the universe, what science says about it, what the Bible says about it, and if they can be matched. I'll see you then. Bye. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. If you did, drop me a like and drop me a comment. Tell me what you enjoyed about it. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Thanks for watching as always, and God bless you all. Goodbye.